Hello folks, and welcome back. Today in the workshop we've got the Japanese hornbeam, Carpinus japonica. If you remember in previous videos, I wired this side of the tree down almost flat. And there was a couple folks that were wondering why I was doing that and what was the reasoning behind that. And I replied, as soon as I remove the wire, a lot of the branches are going to start coming up again, because that's just a plant's tendency, is to grow upward towards the light. And as you can see, it's done that. What you see on here right now is one season's worth of growth. We'll go ahead and do a quick 360 so we can do it before. And then I'm going to be doing a lot of pruning for ramification. As you can see, in 1 year's time, I was able to get a whole bunch of really nice ramification on the tree. As with anything in nature, I've got some dieback in some areas that I didn't really want to have dieback, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to these things. For instance, in the front here, this whole area of the tree is now dead, as well as these two main roots. This whole corner of the tree is dead. This back corner is alive, and the entire, as you are looking at it, would be the left side of the tree is still alive. I intentionally tried to leave everything I could on this tree grow freely this year to try to help keep this portion alive, but of course I'm finding with these hornbeams, they're kind of like a juniper in a way, where if there's nothing growing above the area of those roots, that whole area dies back. To some extent, I think that's kind of true, and to some extent I can't really explain it, because of course this and this are kind of in a way directly above this area and they're still alive. Apparently this root and this root right here feed that portion of the tree. We can make some dead wood and it'll add a little interest and a mystery to the tree, but it's still a phenomenal tree. So what we're going to focus on today is, of course, taming this beast. Selective cutting back these branches over here for the ramification. I am going to take one of these longer whips here and thread graft it. I need a branch up here on this side. Of course, if you remember, I tried to do an approach graft there last year that failed because the branch itself broke. So this year, because I have all these whips, what I'm going to do is actually thread graft through the tree. It's the same technique we've been using a lot on the trident maples out there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to grab some tools here. Now, this is December, and there are some folks, and this is obviously going to be dependent on where you live and what your area is. If you get really, really cool winters, your trees are going to probably be dormant right now. Yesterday, it was 80 degrees here in South Carolina. So, as a consequence of that, this tree is already pushing bud growth. I don't know if you can see those buds, but it's already starting. The buds are starting to swell, believe it or not. And this is 4 days before Christmas. So I've got to get to this now. I hope we don't have a cold snap come through, which could possibly jeopardize this tree for next growing season. But, we've got to kind of do what we got to do at this point in time to minimize any risk of that. I'm probably going to keep this branch here to do my thread grafting. It's a smaller secondary branch off of this main shoot down here. The buds at the tip have not swollen up as much as a lot of the other ones have, which is going to help me, because the smaller the drill bit that you can put through the tree, the quicker the wound's going to heal and the quicker that graft is going to take. Back here, in an attempt to keep as much alive back here as possible, I allow these two branches to grow freely. I'm going to cut them completely off now, And if there is something that decides to sprout there again, that's awesome. But right now they're trying to be new apexes, and the key is to try to keep only one apex on the tree, which of course we've already established is up here. The rest of this stuff, I'm going to just go ahead and keep working on as I talk. I think I'm going to keep this smaller growth here and get rid of this larger growth. This branch right here, I don't know if you can see it or not, this branch coming off of here, I wired the tip up so it could grow freely, and what that does is of course thicken up the branch. I'm sure you can see it's gotten fairly thick in one growing season. I'm contemplating allowing it grow freely again this year so it can thicken up some more. I need to keep an eye on it so it doesn't get above my apex. Because if it starts getting a little bit above the apex, we'll want to, trim it back and maybe try this leader for this year or next year to allow that extension growth to continue to happen. Another thing is, I've got some smaller extension growth underneath here. I don't even think it's still alive, but always got a plan for the future. There's a bud right here and a small branch on the top, which will eventually become the growing end of this branch, and this long piece right here is more of a sacrificial at the moment. Just like this one here, for instance, this one, yeah, its buds are already starting to push out. I've got a smaller one right here, so we're going to cut back to there. That's going to become the new end of that branch, and it'll start ramifying from there. Keeping this one for extension growth. This does not need to get any thicker than it already is. Well, it could stand to be a little thicker, I guess. We'll let this one go as well. And now it's just a matter of coming in here and selectively choosing which branches you're going to keep for the future. Now, of course, like I've said in past videos, you always want to be thinking about where you cut these trees. The species in general and hornbeam in general, the growth habit of these is opposite each other, and what that means is, or not opposite, but alternating, sorry. Opposite of each other would be where these buds, you would have two of them come out at the same location, kind of like in the maples families, like the Japanese maple for instance. You'll have two dormant buds at one location and you'll have two branches. This one here you have alternates, so you'll have a bud here, and then a bud here, and then a bud here, and then a bud here. And they kind of alternate across the branch. So when you're trimming these, if you have a branch on this side already, of course you don't want to trim to this bud, because if you trim to this bud, then you're going to have two branches going the same direction. So you want to select a bud on the opposite side so it's growing away from the current branch that you have in that area. So just keep that in mind when you're trimming species that have alternate buds on the stem. That's the one I'm keeping. And sometimes you've got to cut way back into the tree to get that. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue to trim this about. I'm not going to bore you with doing this for the whole tree, but I did want to mention that to you because it's kind of important to plan the future of your tree with your pruning on this kind of species. And in a way also, the Japanese maples, even though you have two of them coming from the same location, you're going to want to have in mind an ultimate design for the tree as well. So eventually, one of those two branches that come out from that same intersection, you're going to want to remove one of them to get the growth in the direction that you're going to want it to be in. So just be keeping all that in mind when you do your pruning. And of course, first things first is you always want to make sure you remove any overlapping branches as well. In this tree's current state, we've got trunk development done, we've got the majority of the main branch is done. Now we're working on the ramification portion. So the ramification part's where it gets a little bit more technical. And I wanted to show you here as well. If you notice, this side of the tree was where all those branches were wired flat. This back one has almost gone to about a 45-degree angle from where it was before. Of course, that's because, you know, the light is up, so it's always going to want to do that. This one, the secondary branch or the middle branch here, is a little bit different plane than what this one is, and that's what creates that layering effect in the tree. So I've got one down low, I've got one up high, and then one about in the middle of those two. So when you look at this side when it's in full leaf, it looks like a large, densely covered area, when actually it's three different layers. Okay, here we are after we've done selection of the branches that we're going to continue to utilize on this tree. I let this tree get a little bit unruly this year, and this is kind of a lesson that should have been known. Just had a lot going on this year, to be honest with you, and didn't have a lot of time to devote to my trees, but you see a lot of strong branches here, and even more so before we started cutting. A lot of the interior branches on this tree got shaded out, and as a consequence they died. What I'm doing now is I have gone through, of course, and removed all the dead branches, and then I've cut back to the smallest live branches as far as the secondary and tertiary branches go on each main branch. If that makes sense. So you've got the main branch, and then you've got your, tertiary branches. There were some strong ones that took off, and then there were some smaller, weaker ones, but they still have swollen buds. Those are the ones that I've kept, and those are the ones I want to keep because continuing to work with those, you'll get smaller, finer tracery of twigs on this tree eventually. Of course, it's going to back bud this spring, just like they do all the time. Now, what I'm going to be focusing on, you see I've left this branch here. I decided on this branch, instead of leaving that big long one, to go ahead and go to this next branch here that was smaller, that's on the same stem, because what's going to end up happening is I want more energy to get to this small branch here, which is going to be the final branch. And it's still alive, it's got some live buds on it, but if I was to leave this one on, all the energy would more than likely get focused on growing this, and these would eventually die off because they would be shaded. This branch right here I'm keeping to thicken up the first branch here. This second branch on this side, there's actually I only left two. A lot of it was dead, and there was a main one farther back down the branch itself that was growing straight up, and it was sucking energy away from these outer ones. I am going to go ahead and do some wiring on this tree right now because these branches are very flexible still. They may still go back into a partial dormancy, but these branches think it's spring with the bud extension that you can see here, and they will bend pretty severely without an issue. So now would be the good time to go ahead and wire them just to get them set in the position. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to go ahead and wire everything where we want it to be. Let's do a little 360 on it now so you can kind of see where we are at this point. Believe it or not, all this dead, these down here are still alive. All these roots down here are still alive. This dead has now continued up to the top, so I may be extending the shari on up and then through into the top. This branch will be redirected for a back branch, so at least I'll have some kind of back branch up in this area, but it will be coming from this corner and around. So I'll be bringing this back and around, and then I've got another couple branches up here I can bring over or just develop in this back area here at the top, because of course we're not going to get anything down low because it's all dead. So got some other branches in some areas, like for instance up here in this front corner there was a branch that was growing out and straight up here. I've elected to get rid of it for a smaller branch so I can move it into position a lot easier, a lot less effort, less of a chance of the bark splitting because it is a very, very young shoot. You can get it into position real easily without running the risk of breaking the bark. I mean, you still have that risk, but you need to, it's a lot easier with a smaller branch because there's less of it there to bend. So we're going to go ahead and get this now wired into position. I'm going to go ahead and do my thread graft that I need to bring myself a branch over here in this area. As you can see, this side of the tree's got a lot of branching. This one has nothing in this area right here, so I'm going to bring a branch in somewhere right probably around here is going to be my best guess. If I can down lower, I may try to bring it in down around this area here, which will of course fill in this front area. Then we've got this branch and then this branch and of course the top, which will work out pretty well. I am going to prop this up just a little bit. When I wired this a little while ago, I got a little carried away and it was down too much, so I'm going to put some kind of device here to bring this back up to about here so we can, you know, get a little bit of a difference in elevation between the right and left sides of this tree. So I got to see if there's anything alive down in here, and if there is, that's where I'm going to go ahead and thread graft through. So I'm going to try to fill an area like here on the tree, because really, if you look down from the top, there's really nothing in this area right here to fill in. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to get wire and thread graft, and we'll be back shortly. Alright, our work on this tree for this season is complete in regards to the selective placement of the branches and selecting the branches, taking off and removing what we don't want to keep. I think you can see right here I went ahead and did a thread graft. It enters on this side and exits on this side, fingers crossed, just like the trident maples. It'll take, and then I've got a branch right where I need it in that position. I got live vein on both sides of it, so I hope it will do okay. Never thread grafted a Japanese hornbeam before, so we'll see if it works. Well, I take that back. I tried to approach graft it and it didn't work, so hopefully the thread graft will. I went ahead and wired everything that I needed to wire. I did go ahead and remove this that I was going to let grow to thicken up this front branch, and the reason I did that is because I have two smaller branches out beyond that area that I wanted to keep viable. So in order to keep that energy flowing through to the very end of the branches, I went ahead and removed it as well. So I'm going to do a quick 360 here for you. A couple branches here that aren't quite in where I need them to be. I'm gonna, just a few minor adjustments here after I do this 360 on the where I want the branches to be. And that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and get the 360 done. Again, I'm going to get a piece of wood or a dowel rod or something, and I'm going to prop this branch up over here so it's more along that plane. So that's really the only other adjustment I'm going to be making to the tree. Other than that, that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments and your views and your subscriptions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to either post a comment below or you can send me a personal message.